Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Rachel, can you keep an eye on the waiting room and admit anybody if they are still popping in? Thank you so much. Okay, good morning, everyone. I hope that everyone is doing well today on this sunny day. I know yesterday weather-wise around the state was a little bit rough, but today it looks beautiful. So I'm optimistic about that and about the weekend. For any of you who don't know me, my name is Amber Sheeran, and I am the Program and Event Director with MLA. And I want to thank you again for joining us today. I know a lot of you, probably most of you, have had a very busy couple of weeks as things are starting to reopen. And you're getting back into your libraries. I know there's a lot of planning and cleaning and preparing that everyone's doing. So I really appreciate you taking some time to join us today. One thing that I want to talk about, or that we want to talk about, and really the focus of today is communication and communicating with our patrons and with our communities about reopening and new expectations and new policies and just the importance of being in the front of their mind and from a PR standpoint. So I'm really excited for the guests that we have joining us today. I'm going to introduce them in a second. But before we get started, I want to just remind everyone that this is supposed to be a dialogue, so you're welcome to unmute yourself to speak, ask any questions that you have. But if you're not speaking, we just ask that you keep yourself muted out of respect to those that are speaking. If you have a camera, please have that on. You're not required to by any means, but it helps kind of feel like we're kind of a whole group and can look each other in the eye a little bit, even if we're far away. And then cheers to everyone on this for this coffee hour. So let's get started. I am really excited to welcome two panelists today. So we have Trent Smiley, he's the Director of Communications and Marketing for the Capital Area District Library. And we have Victoria Meadows, who's the Vice President of Marketing and Communications for the Lansing Economic Area Partnership, but before she was there, she started her career as the Communications Manager for the Lansing Community College. So I'm excited to kind of have a public library representative and academic library representative to talk about their unique perspectives. So Trent and Victoria, welcome today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So Victoria, I'm going to get started with you. If you want to just kind of talk a little bit about some of the things that you're working on and your thoughts about communications with the public right now, especially, during times of crisis. And
Sure. I think, as you noted, my perspective in terms of specifically library communication comes from the academic setting, which is similar but a little bit different. I think there's some nuances and opportunities actually for communicating with that particular audience or the variety of audiences that you might want to be in touch with in an academic setting. In general, in sort of the scope of crisis communications in this particular environment and with the challenges we have right now, I think, the number one top priority is to provide people with life-saving information, and to some degree, while we're not talking about necessarily avoid the tsunami, we are talking about practices that are life-saving, potentially life-saving. So I think it would be I would maybe suggest sort of framing the conversation around that these are practices we have in place to protect you essentially and your families and our community in whatever scope we're talking about, a public library or an academic library there. So I know that MLA is kind of suggesting to people that they over communicate, which normally I wouldn't say is a good strategy, but right now there's just this immense waterfall of constant communication, and there's so much going on in the world that there's a real chance that you're not top of mind. And often, even in an academic setting anyways, people aren't necessarily thinking of the library until they need that service. So they're thinking about it from more or less, I need this information, or I need this help, or I need, when they need it, not necessarily proactively, if that makes sense. So I think you have to have a multi-channel wherever your patrons are. You've got to be communicating there in a consistent way. And while that might not translate, as you're preparing to open, giving yourself this sort of like push of information towards the patrons prior to the opening, if you can do that. I'm not sure what each individual, library, what you might have different challenges that you're being told you got to open tomorrow. I don't know what the situations are, but as much sort of excessive amount of information you can give ahead of time, great. And then kind of continuing that and supplementing all of that in person or as people are using the service, I think would make a lot of sense.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, that was a little lengthy.
No, I think that was great. And I think I definitely agree with what you touched on about that waterfall of constant communication. I know I've been getting emails and things from every company that I've ever been on a mailing list for about what they're doing. And so it's important to not get lost in that waterfall. So thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Trent and Smiley. So Trent, can you tell us a little bit about how Cattle has been managing through the shutdown and how you've been keeping?
Sure. Actually, even prior to the crisis, we really put a concerted effort to build our overall marketing reach. And what I mean by that is really going beyond our four walls, really going through partnerships, with media, with other community partners, to really have another outlet in which to communicate and to push out messaging. Also frequency, we're really high on that. How often are you hearing our different messages? We can't necessarily rely just on the media. They do one story and then it's gone. So we really try to look at ways where we can increase our overall reach into the community, as well as how often folks are hearing our particular message. So with that said, then what we kind of did, the three different elements that we really focused on at the start of the crisis and actually currently is, for one, we wanted to really have a solid platform in which we communicated information about the actual closing. We wanted to keep our members and the public up to date on things that have changed within our service model, as well as our reopening plan. So for example, we created a COVID response page, a special page on our website, where every time the governor came out and there was a new executive order, whatever, then that was kind of in real time. So we actually said, okay, this is going to impact us in this type of way. So we kind of kept it. Plus we wanted to create an actual page where people would know that's the go-to page for information on where we are now. Okay, so we created that. We have an email service that we have. So again, we were communicating with a lot of our members through that, again, directing them to that special page for more information. Something that we actually started doing with our executive director, we started doing Facebook live chats. And those really did a very good job of communicating with our membership. Also, it gave them an opportunity to ask questions. So that was really something that really did well for us. We started out probably about 2,000 views on that. Now the last one he did was about 4,000. So it definitely is a nice way for us to interact, to communicate what our plan is moving forward, as well as really answering some questions because a lot of times people don't want to go to the website and read all the information. They just want to ask their one question and be gone. So, when are you opening, or why did you choose to go this type of plan? So he had that opportunity to really interact with our members. Also through social interaction, we had opportunity to ask questions. That's people, maybe Facebook sending us a message, hey, what should I do with this book? Should I hold it? Should I bring it in, and so forth? So we had the ability to have that two-way communication. We used our podcast as a way of, again, communicating information. about the different levels of service we were offering, as well as actually bringing in other folks from other sectors of the community. For example, we did a interview with someone from local government because we wanted to be able to share with our members what impact does this have on local government. And then we brought in another nonprofit, again, just to show what type of impact. So we kind of did a whole COVID coverage, and not necessarily always focused on us, but just in general as a community as a whole. Of course, we secured a number of media interviews to really communicate the levels of service we have, the type of services that we're offering, which of course was digital, which is still digital that we're pushing, as well as some of the other information that needed to be in the public space. We also wanted to promote services. Again, we felt this was a good opportunity to really put our digital platforms right up front. We did a large amount of paid ads for digital. That really was fruitful for us. We had record checkout for Hoopla and some of our other platforms. It really brought a lot of new members in because we have online registration. So it really gave us opportunity to provide a service that met a growing demand, especially at the beginning of the crisis. So we did that. Again, we did a lot of Facebook ads, Instagram ads, something like that many libraries can do. I mean, you can start a budget from $1 all the way up to $500. Again, allowed for us to really target folks, especially non-members, and gave us the ability to really see in real time what type of response our messaging was getting. Let's see, what else do I have here? Content sharing is a big thing for us. We like to build a network, like I was saying before, of reach and for frequency. So we already have a lot of our selectors embedded in publications, local publications, where they write columns on a regular basis. So we were able to utilize a lot of those outlets to push out information about our digital services and so forth. So that's something you may really want to look into doing. Plus, we control the narrative. It's not that we give to the paper and then they pick what they want, you know, or report on what they want. We have the ability to control that narrative. So we utilize a lot of those partnerships to really push out a lot of information about the different services. And again, I had mentioned podcasts. We shared information with schools during their Facebook page groups, other community partners, because really a lot of them were closed, so they didn't really have a lot of content. So we were a provider of content to them when they were helping us reach additional folks that we may not have the ability to do so.
Thank you. We did get a question in the chat box that just said, what kind of organizations do you do that content sharing with, or what local partnerships have you formed?
Sure. Great example of that is we have a partnership with CATA, which is our bus company here. They sponsor some things for us, like summer reading. We also have a partnership with them where they provide bus passes for our Library of Things collection. So with them, it was a thing where we send information out. They have a blog that they do for their members, their followers. We provided information about our digital collection. Someone like that we shared with. We shared things with radio stations because now a lot of their online personalities have their own blogs and Facebook pages. So again, they helped us push out the information. So media, business, schools, and so forth.
I'm also wondering, I know you talked about just record demand for some of your digital services. And I think it's interesting to look at situations like we're in right now and find those silver linings or opportunities, rather, I should say, opportunities for where we can grow or new directions we can go. Have you found any other kind of new or exciting developments or opportunities that have come as a result of this situation?
I think just really some services that we were thinking about offering but hadn't got to. Definitely this particular crisis showed the need for Wi-Fi hotspots. A lot of our communities, a lot of our schools have reached out, hey, can you help us out? Our students don't have access to these computers that we're giving them for them to learn from home. So that's definitely something that we're looking into expanding as we move forward.
That's great. So I'm going to turn this over to Victoria again for a moment. And actually, Trent, you could talk to this as well, but I want to give her an opportunity. One thing that we've gotten a lot of questions about is, I know you both talked about social media and sharing on Facebook especially. And we've also heard a lot of people talking about patrons and communities that are eager for them to reopen faster than maybe the libraries are comfortable with. Do you have any tips or best practices or recommendations for when you get maybe angry patrons on social media that are demanding answers? Or how do you communicate with those that may be posting negative things or arguments on your page?
Well, I think kind of, there was another question. I think we talked about this a little bit before even the event started, but in terms of responding to negativity, I think, you can use the same sort of mental strategy that you would use in an in-person setting when being sort of confronted with a patron who doesn't want to wear a mask, for example. I think the theories behind de-escalation apply in a social media setting as they do in an in-person setting. So it would not be my recommendation to engage in a power struggle with someone and their feelings and attitudes towards whatever it is you are not doing for them in a social setting, just as that would not be my recommendation in an in-person setting. I think, when people express attitudes and feelings in an aggressive way, that you have some choices to make about the boundaries that you set, and validating that they feel the way that they feel. I don't want to wear a mask, or why aren't you opening for me? Can be met with, we understand how inconvenient this is for you and for everyone. Our primary concern is to XYZ. And if you'd like to talk further about this, try to take that conversation offline. Call me directly. Here's an email. Here's another opportunity. In person, that's more difficult, but the same concept, like psychologically, can apply there. How do I make this person take them offline, essentially keeping distance socially and just, physically keeping distance, and maybe inviting that person to, let's take a minute where we can collect our thoughts and maybe sit down. If you're not willing to put the mask on right now, why don't we sit over here so that we can talk about this? With negative commentary too, I think, it's kind of tagging on to what Trent's been saying. You're hearing receiving a variety of different questions from your patrons about a lot of different things. You already know what the questions are. You can proactively kind of take those and then message those out in creative ways, proactively on social media, for example, or through a what to expect sheet, or any number of different channels and ways to do that, through your COVID page, which I can, would also advocate for, based on, what Trent already said. But I think, again, just sort of familiarizing yourself with strategies for de-escalating intense situations. There's probably a lot of information about that out there right now, frankly, and that would be my recommendation.
Just to kind of piggyback off of that, again, I think it is important to keep your folks informed, and we try to be proactive in that regard. I think really a lot of that comes from when they don't know, they don't have the information. But we kind of laid the expectation is, okay, these are the levels of service that we're offering. And it's for your safety and the safety of our staff. And that's kind of how we frame it. So we haven't really received any negative. I mean, definitely people, they want to get back into our buildings. But we really laid it out that, we have to go through these steps to ensure everyone's safety. So I think just really being proactive and continuing to communicate, this is where we are now, this is where we expect to be at this point. I think that plays a big role in kind of squashing some of the negative comments, if there were any.
And I think, just from a personal point of view, as a Lansing resident and patron of cattle, I think the COVID information that's on there, you're right. It's been updated lightning speed. And I think as a patron myself, I've really appreciated knowing that, and it's answered those questions before I had them. So I think that's a lot of what you're talking about, is just being proactive and getting at that before there's an issue that arises.
Absolutely.
So, well, I think everyone has heard from me plenty. So I'm going to open this up to see if anybody here has any questions or wants to add to our discussion. So I'll give you a moment to unmute yourself. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask or anything they want to add?
This is Debbie. Just going back a little bit to the, maybe that little bit of that negative. I think we are hearing every library is a little bit different. And if you haven't set up expectations yet, it's probably time to set those expectations for the patrons. But what would you do in a circumstance if a patron said, your my taxes have been going to the public library, you've been closed now for 3 months, I want my money back. So those are, it's not just that, oh, I'm so angry that you're closed and I can't get in. There's now kind of the next burden is on top of everybody as we start to think even gradually reopen. But, how do you respond to those kinds of questions, and how prepared, Trenton, Victoria, would you be to anticipate those kinds of questions? And so it's anticipating what's next. And I'd love to hear maybe your perspectives on kind of like, what should we be looking for? What's next?
Mm-hmm. I think you could say the same thing even in a academic library, right? Like, I'm paying tuition and I don't feel like I'm getting full service, et cetera, et cetera. I think that actually that de-escalation framework really does apply again here. Some questions are best not addressed. You can divert. I think, there was a time in my life where I felt like we have to respond to everything. And there are times where you absolutely have to respond. In fact, sometimes you cannot respond, and then you can issue directly, and then you can issue a communication around the topic in a way that helps you articulate it in a little bit more digestible way. We've been getting a lot of questions about X. This is the sort of the situation. That's harder to do in person, of course, as we've talked about. But I don't know, Trent, if you've had direct experience with that, but from my perspective, that there are times where you just have to deflect that question. You can't control that. That's part of the issue, is that, I understand that is really disappointing. I also pay taxes for this, particular thing, or I understand that it feels like you're not getting your money's worth, but it's not something that we have direct control over.
No, I definitely agree with that. And also, really what we tried to do is we focused on what we could control. Mm-hmm. Digital was that thing, so we really tried to show a lot of value from all these different type of platforms that we had, and that's what we spoke on. We have things that help folks might have lost their job. We have this service that'll help you start training for a new one. Mm-hmm. And we really try to present the right message at the right time. Rather than saying, yeah, we don't have this, we just really focused on what we could provide to folks. So again, we kind of just stayed on that. We might have a couple of folks that might have commented on social, but I don't really think it was negative. It's just more of a disappointment. I want to get back in. I want to, yeah. I'm a person that loves to hold the book rather than the digital. But rather than that, we may say, yeah, we understand. And then we kind of move on to trying to get them into some other type of product to get them through the process. So,
mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm seeing in the comments here too, like this idea that, like, hey, we want a rebate or, whatever. I think someone says here that it's important to be empathetic, and it is. You know, I think we have a tendency, especially in drawing back on my service providing days, and then also just in general with what I'm, you know, faced with right now, is it's totally human and natural to feel defensive sometimes when it feels like it's a personal attack. And in my opinion, that's not really listening. So trying to put yourself in the listening perspective and separating yourself with some measure of, you know, detached compassion, I guess, is a really good first way to start de-escalating a negative situation or negative feedback, like I want my money back. You know, that sort of hearing the person and giving that feedback loop that you understand what they're saying, and here's how we can work together to sort of come to reality or resolve the situation, or some other options like you mentioned, Trent. But exactly, making people feel like they're being heard is a critical component of this. You may not be able to you know, resolve every aspect of it, but it goes a long way.
And I think this opportunity allowed for some of our members to see other things that we offered. They almost come in with blinders where this is only service that I use. So this kind of opened up their eyes to all these other things that created even more value that their membership has and what their taxes pay for. Wow, I didn't know you guys had that. Well, yeah, we do. You know, before it was just, I'm coming in, I'm grabbing my book, I'm gone. Where now, you know, you have that opportunity to really kind of jump in to see all the different type of services we offer. So we really use it as an opportunity to really try to educate our current members as well as reach out to new ones. So.
Yeah, and I think another thing I guess I would add would be that I think, and this is difficult too, but libraries helping their staff understand where there is room for flexibility in some of these instances, it would be really, really helpful. I think we want to go in with this rigid plan of this is what we're doing, da 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 da, but maybe there is some measure of flexibility at times, and so maybe accepting that this is the ideal situation, but when we're confronted with, we know that there might be issues here. When we're confronted with those issues, what level of flexibility exists for us to address, you know, unique situations, I guess.
I had just one more, because you both a little bit talked about, and I know Victoria, in her current position with the Lansing Economic Area Partnership, instead of on a weekly basis, they do an interview with the executive director. And Trenton, Scott's been all over the place, but I've seen such creativity coming out of some of your libraries just in the last few days. I don't know if you all saw the little puppet that came from another national library about the curbside services, and
Nashville, I think it was.
Nashville. It was really cute. And then Holly Ward Lamb did something at the Hall Carnegie District Library about how curbside was going to work, and just literally went through the paces. This is come in this way. I'm going to tell you to pop your trunk, so pop your trunk. But the video and some of the ways that maybe we're not thinking of, and the ways that we could use some of the technology, audio, video, I see a lot of paper still coming across the desk. But what else, what are some of call them newer, but what are the newer ways that we can get our messages across that might resonate with younger audiences, or with just those that might not be reading our, we put out a lot of materials, but might not be reading our materials. And I'm looking at Rachel because she keeps wanting me to do something like that. And I'm like, I don't know if I have a comfort level with that yet. So, but why don't you talk about a little, Victoria, I know, your weekly interview with Bob was a really important, kind of maneuver for you many years ago.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think Trent touched on this a little bit already. The video, Facebook Live feed, content and that sort of thing. Video is like the most engaging content you can provide in social media. It's far and above. And any visual content is going to be much more appealing and surface more easily for people in social media, for sure. I think, there are some guidelines, I guess, around length and that sort of thing. And if you're doing a live video, you can get very long. Long form live video is very engaging. So webinars, doing something like live streaming your webinar through your social platform is a great way to increase reach and develop engagement. Then in addition to that, if you want to do short form video and you don't, we think like, oh my God, I got to have a camera, I got to have this, not necessarily. Really, I worked in an academic library in a community college. We didn't have a budget. And I mean, literally everything was almost cost neutral. So keeping that in mind, something like Canva, if you're not using it, is an excellent low cost way to even create video content. And you can upload your own video content, if it, cell phone video, or you can create video from static imagery. And it's really a very, very useful tool. So I think I would advocate for that. A couple $100 a year. I know that for some people is sounds like a huge barrier, just having experienced that on my own. But those are some options, and I guess I would just sort of support what Trent had already said earlier in terms of providing video content is a really strong way to increase the reach of your message, but also instigate engagement from your audience.
I know we started doing short recommendation videos from our staff that have been real popular, because we heard from a lot of our members on social that they kind of missed them. So it was really cool to have that type of interaction by having them appear in short videos recommending a service or recommending a title that we would just kind of space out through our different media platforms, social media platforms. So something like that would be cool. Maybe utilizing something with someone within the community to highlight them in some kind of way. I know East Lansing had Tom Izzo do a story time, and that had huge engagement. So something like that kind of brings people into the tent a little bit. So once they're there, then you can kind of promote other things to them. So we try to do things like that as well through media folks. We have them appear in some of our commercials because a lot of them have their own followings. So we try to incorporate that where we can kind of play off of folks who are into, watching that particular station or that particular newscast or radio station. We try to incorporate that where we're hitting you a whole bunch of different ways. You may see a person from a radio station thinking he's talking about the radio station, then he starts talking about hoopla. So we try to do that and try to spice it up where, it's not just the same old, same old.
Can you talk a little bit too about maybe your relationship with newspapers and radio stations and how to keep, again, I think that sometimes we forget they're out there because we have so many of our own communication vehicles, but can you talk about maybe relationship building with them and how to keep in their good graces?
Sure. What we try to do is we really try to leverage the resources that the library has. And I've said this for a number of years. And what I mean by that is we have something that we can offer them. For instance, when we go into partnership with radio stations, sometimes we may say, you know what, we have some Kindle Fires that we can give you as prizes for your listeners. Because radio stations, actually all media really deals in trade. They don't necessarily like to buy anything. They want to trade their advertising for a good or service. And that's how they kind of operate. So understanding that, we try to do a lot of those type of things. We provide them with content, like I mentioned earlier, but also we have a base of folks, of supporters that they may want to connect with. So we kind of utilize those type of things where we both win. So what we typically do is we reach out to them. Like, for instance, we have some radio stations that are supporters of summer reading, some TV stations are supporters of summer reading. So we continually try to find ways where we can partner together. And it really helps us out, because then when something comes up, like, for instance, let me give you an example. Channel 10 here did a public service announcement for stay home, stay safe. And they included it in this because we're top of mind. So they ran that, and Scott appeared in that particular PSA. And then there were some other things that we needed help promoting some of our services. You know, they gave it to us for free. So it really, truly is a relationship that we build. And it's not always a monetary relationship. They know, you know, how the public views us, and they hold us in high regard. So they definitely want to be part of that as well, knowing that there is that support system. So we continually try to find ways that we partner together.
Thank you, Trent. One question that just came through, and I'll let either Trent or Victoria answer it. But the question says, I'm working with my board to institute a fine and lost item clean slate to bring patrons back. And I know a lot of libraries are starting to go fine free. How would you suggest framing that in a way that would play well with the kind of the people that are concerned with the tax dollars and that demographic?
We have something similar, read off fines, that we're doing along with summer reading. And we kind of make it about the kids. No one's really going to say anything when it's for kids. It's kind of knocking down some barriers to use. So definitely I would use that sort of as the framing for that, is to really go for young people, first of all, and maybe start it that way and see what type of traction you get. But I think we've been doing it for about 2 years now, and it's done well. But like I said, we tie it to summer reading, and then we have that as another piece to it. Media would love something like that, because again, it's showing that you're knocking down barriers to use.
I would support that too. What Trent just said, and sometimes, you know, we've done that too, or we did do that at one point when we consolidated at the LCC library, just sort of this, you know, amnesty, you know, moment on occasion, especially. And I know that they did that recently with, you know, textbook lending and laptop lending and that sort of thing, that just like, boom, all of a sudden, what are we supposed to do? Am I incurring fines and so on? And the answer was no, we're not gonna do that to people. I guess I get the argument that, you know, that there would be a negative response to, you know, a tax dollars issue. I have to think about that a little bit more, actually, to go beyond, you know, the children as kind of the bolstering for that particular issue. But I think I'm currently looking through my what do you care lens right now. Like, why is that negative?
Yeah. I think we could all, especially in these times, focus on the positives a little bit, you know, that helps all of us. So I wanted to ask as well, I know you both talked about lots of platforms that you use for communication. For some of the libraries that may be smaller with limited staff, especially staffs that might now be furloughed or laid off and are just starting to come back and are struggling with that, what platforms do you think are the most important to focus on? Would you recommend their institution's website, or is it staying on social media on Facebook, getting out to people more? Where do you think the energy should be put for people that maybe have limited resources and time?
Well, definitely the website is key, but I really think social media, like I mentioned before, the budget is very small, but again, allows for you to target new folks. and to bring them into the tent. I think that's one of the things that a lot of libraries tend to do is it's so inward. They don't necessarily reach out. And this kind of crisis kind of shined a light on that for a lot of folks where, okay, everything is happening within the branch. Now the branch is closed. Now what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
So really creating, I really think social is something that the budgets are very small, but it has good impact and you're able to really narrow what your message is and target a certain segment. You know, that's what we've been using a lot of. I mean, we do some of the high-end stuff too, but I mean, definitely that's one of the basics that we incorporate into our mix.
I would agree with that. And to even get a little bit more granular there, you know, social is kind of a broad scope as well. And you know your audience or your specific audience and who is where in what specific platform. Just speaking from having been a one-woman show, you know, at LCC Library, like with very little support and a lot of other work to do, the idea of being, you know, holistically present in social media was just not a reality. So we had to be a little bit more choosy on where we spent our time. And if you just can't, you don't know, really, maybe you don't have good information about your audience and where specifically they are in social media, then I think I would choose Facebook as a place to invest your time, just simply because it, regardless of how active they are, pretty much every age group and demographic is using Facebook in some way, shape, or form. And it's easy to connect that with Instagram too, so that you're not having to post in both places. You really just have to post in one place and you can distribute the message in multiple channels at once. So that would be one thing I would say. And then for an academic library, I think there probably most people are already aware of this, so I'm not really giving good information here or new information here, but students specifically, to reach students, you know, working through instructors is your primary, you know, of course during the summer, I don't know, but you know, a great avenue for getting information to students. That's who they're listening to probably more than anyone else. So I would advocate connecting with those strong relationships, and then maybe even using faculty who you have good relationships with as network nodes to reach, you know, deeper into their own individual departments if possible. I mean, there's a lot of other, you know, issues with, you know, the imbalance of, you know, part-time faculty to full-time faculty in an academic setting, which presents numerous challenges in actually reaching faculty as your primary sort of megaphone for reaching students. But I mean, that is I think one very important thing to be thinking about in trying to get the message out.
And I go back to what I said earlier about leveraging what you have. Doesn't always have to be monetary. So for instance, if you want to be able to reach out to folks, new folks, then why not go approach a TV 10 or a radio station and have it as a trade where you say, okay, if you help me promote summer reading, then we'll have your logo on our flyer or we'll put it on our website. That's a way for you to get out and be able to reach new people without necessarily using money. You're just using something that you already have. You may have some publications that you create. Use those, leverage those as inventory for someone to buy into you. It doesn't necessarily always have to be money.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, kind of to tag onto that, Trent, I think, you know, it depends, I suppose, on your specific region. Cattle serves a pretty good chunk of the Lansing region, or as I think of the Lansing region, I guess. But it might be beneficial to collaborate with other library systems in your region that utilize the same media channels so that you can collaborate on a collective messaging around, you know, libraries are starting to reopen. Here's the specifics, you know, that kind of thing.
Good idea.
This is Debbie again. It would be really interesting if you all can open your chat and just tell us how much money do you, approximately, you don't have to give it specific, but how much money are you dedicating to your communications and marketing? It would just be interesting to know kind of where everybody is. And I love the ideas that Trent and Victoria have just shared about. There's so much more that can happen in a collaborating mode, and your reach and your return on investment for building those relationships are so important. But I'd just be interested to see if everybody's willing just to put an approximate, like, what are you spending on your communication vehicles? Is it, you know, $1,000 or on a yearly basis, or is it $10,000? So, because I know that everybody is, you know, we're all, you know, that's probably, you know, something that you're all thinking about. And I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about the advertising on Facebook and things like that, and if any of you are actually doing that. But Trent, are you doing? You're doing some of that advertising on
We
Facebook?
are, and we also actually, I think it was last year, we secured a Google Ads grant. So with that grant is we're able to promote things through keyword searches. So just, I want to say a few months ago, we were able to connect our catalog to it. So it provides the right message at the right time. You're looking for dogs, our titles on dogs comes up. Okay, and that's all being funded through a Google Ads, which is about $10,000 per month you get for that. So things like that definitely will help you. And again, you're providing the right service at the right time when someone is doing a keyword search. But yeah, we do Facebook, we do YouTube. I don't do newspapers like I used to. I don't think I've bought an ad yet this year. We're really moving more toward digital because it gives me the analytics. I get to see things real time.
Mm-hmm.
For the paper, I'm not able to do that. So we really are focusing more on digital. We have been for probably the last couple of years. And to be honest with you, I mean, an ad for digital is maybe $12 per 1,000 impressions. That's not a lot of money. So to scrape up $1,000 or $2,000, maybe focus on a particular thing. Maybe it's summer reading we're going to make a big splash with. It really doesn't take a lot to do a lot of digital marketing. That's kind of the equalizer now, where before TV spots were 60 to 90 bucks a spot. You know, you don't necessarily have to go that way anymore. You can definitely go digital, and then that way they're linking right back to your website. You know, it's not that intermediate where I see it on TV, now I got to make that next step is to go to my computer, go to your website, where with the digital, I click right on it and I'm right there. Instant gratification. So the conversion rate will be a lot higher through digital than maybe some of these other forms of advertising that we've been using.
Thank you. We have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to open it up to some more questions from the attendees. But I wanted to touch on quickly, if you could, both of you maybe talk about the importance of branding for the libraries, or providing kind of that unified message or look, and kind of the importance of that in marketing, so that people know, you know, how to recognize you, and kind of the role that plays in your strategies for communications and for marketing.
Pretty much our goal is to really try to communicate that we're more than just books. I know everybody says that, but really showing other sides to cattle. So we really try to align ourselves with different folks that kind of put the spotlight on other areas that we want to focus. I mean, we have partnerships with women expos. We do things when the Grammys come out. So that pushes our music collection. So we really try to do that to show the library in a different light. During this whole COVID though, like I mentioned earlier, is we really tried to also do a PR campaign to show how much we cared about our community. We wanted them to be safe. So we did some type of marketing that way that promoted, stay home, stay safe. And that was more just a public relations type thing. And to really strengthen that cattle is a part of this community, a big part of this community. So that's definitely figured into our branding during the whole COVID crisis.
To kind of expand on that a little bit, I think, when we talk about branding, a lot of the time people automatically think logos and visual aspects of branding. And, it is a psychological effect, right? That is the importance of branding and consistency there. There's visual pieces to it. There's experiential aspects. And there is, kind of reaching into what Trent was talking about, where you are, the specific words, the way you make people feel. That's what a brand is. How you make people feel, how you say you're going to make people feel, and then how you actually make them feel. That's the brand. The brand and the brand promise. And I think the reason that that's important is related to recall, really. So at the moment in time, especially thinking about the reality of something like an academic library, where we talked about, I only need you when I need you. You have to be able to remember at the moment in time when that is happening, oh, that's what I need. And this is what they can provide for me. And then actually delivering on that. So it really, it's really about impressing on the people whose pain you are designed to solve, that you are a good solution for that, and that the way you make them feel makes them feel that you are that solution, I guess.
Love that it's not just the look, but it's the feeling behind it, and that. So.
Yeah.
So again, we have about, like I said, about 5 minutes left, and I wanted to open it up again to see if anyone had any questions or final thoughts before we wrap up for the day. So I'm going to open it up to any of the people here today to ask any questions you may have.
I just had a quick question about the marketing aspect of helping kids understand what 6 feet looks like, if anyone had any creative ideas.
I think that lends itself to visual description, meaning specifically like, showing pictures of what it looks like in practice. And then, we've been seeing it all kind of laid out in sort of service industry already. When you go to the grocery store, there are these stickers on the floor that sort of articulate to you that they're visual cues, they're user experience guides, they're these things that the way that you arrange your space, all of these things indicate to the individual that, oh, I'm supposed to be here. So reinforcing that, I think, with some sort of visual guide and the ways that you're communicating about how you're serving people ahead of time through social media or on your website or whatever, they all kind of work together so that when you actually get there, you have also this environmental suggestion that helps you understand where you are supposed to be and where you're not supposed to be. And sometimes that's a really easy, direct approach to use too, that do this, not this, and show visually what you mean by that. I'm not sure what Cattle's doing or you said you're doing curbside now, but you're not doing in person yet. But
Right.
But when people do come back into this space, I would think there would have to be some sort of.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're planning that now.
Yeah, and I see somebody saying that they're using, they've seen some libraries using to communicate with children, readily identifiable characters like Dr. Seuss or something to articulate that visually. Now, I assume, you know, there's probably some copyright restriction around that or not. Maybe American Library Association even is having these conversations and have some resources that libraries more widely can purchase or use to help communicate this.
A lot of recommendations about different ways to use pool noodles to help teach kids how big 6 feet is. So
Yeah.
that's definitely a low cost way to do that. And I think one of the comments just said pool noodle marble run craft video. And I think that sounds like a lot of fun to have them interactive, but with that distance between them and keep them at that same, with that physical cue of you can't come between, you know, this much closer. So any other questions that we have before we wrap up for the day?
I have a question. This is Rachel speaking. So I read an article this morning on the New York Times that was talking about libraries struggle to continue, strive to stay community living rooms as they reopen. I'm wondering if more in your long-term kind of branding communication strategies, you're going to be focusing more on these digital resources, since none of us really know how long this crisis is going to be an issue.
Yeah, we plan on it. I mean, we were doing it prior to. And actually with the virtual programming, we want to continue to kind of have that alongside the great programming that our branches offer. And hopefully we'll offer it soon. Because we really think that it really is another option for folks who can't make it in. So that's definitely something we're going to continue to grow.
To devote more of your
Absolutely.
Resources to, you think? Okay.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I'm not working in a library right now, but, you know, drawing on that past experience and then also, you know, what we're seeing, you know, transpire in the entertainment and, excuse me, dining industries, that, you know, this idea that experience is fundamentally changed for all of us, right? That what is it possible to feel like, you know, a community living room anymore if you're out in public? The idea of a coffee house, like just going and hanging, there's just more distance. You can be closer to your party when you're in a public space at this point, but you can't be closer to other people. And if that's your desire, then that's just not possible at this particular point in time. So, you know, that's an interesting question. I think that's something that will be challenging to communicate as a benefit. How you communicate that as a benefit, I think, has to be taken into context with current realities.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for the quick question, Rachel. So at this point it is about 11. So I'm gonna let our speakers let them go. And thank you so much for taking the time and for answering all of our questions. I know we threw a lot of them at you. So we really appreciate it. And we appreciate everyone that joined us today. For anyone that's not aware, we do have an upcoming webinar. I know we talked a lot today about various opportunities that this can lead into. We have a webinar coming up next Tuesday for MLA called How Big Disruptions Can Lead to Big Opportunities. So definitely want to talk a little bit about that further next week. So I encourage you all to visit our website, sign up for that, and then join us again for future coffee hours that we'll have in the weeks to come. Like Debbie said last week, I think these coffee hours were designed to help us connect during this crisis and while we were closed. But as long as people continue to come and find value in it, we're happy to continue it going. So thank you again. And I look forward to seeing all of you, and I appreciate the time today.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.